Hey, today we're going to walk through 7 key questions that will help you understand exactly why your patient mix looks the way it does and what has to change if you want to consistently attract better patients. At OpKey, we've spent years studying why some dental practices, led by incredibly skilled clinicians, still end up attracting low margin, insurance driven and price sensitive patients, while other practices, sometimes with no better clinical skill, attract high quality, relationship driven patients who want comprehensive care. And what we've discovered is that patient quality, case value, and even profitability have surprisingly little to do with clinical ability and almost everything to do with market positioning. So, as we go through these 7 questions, please take note of where something feels familiar. Notice where something resonates. These questions aren't about judgment, they're about providing clarity. And once you see the real cause behind your current patient mix, you'll have a better idea of where to focus to change it. So let's begin. Almost all dentists we talk to are delivering genuinely good dentistry. Many are truly excellent. Yet too often they're attracting patients who don't seem to value that level of care. And the stories are incredibly similar. You invest in marketing, you update your website, you try agencies, SEO funnels, ads, consultants, often working harder and harder. But the patients showing up often have these characteristics. They don't value comprehensive dentistry. They shop based on cost or convenience, ask, what will my insurance cover, or accept only the bare minimum of treatment. And at some point, every dentist asks the same question. If my dentistry is this good, why am I still attracting these types of patients? Um, the answer is relatively simple, but it doesn't get discussed a lot. Patient quality is a positioning problem, not a marketing problem. Marketing only amplifies what's already there. If positioning is misaligned, you get more of what you don't want. So these 7 questions were built to help you see exactly why this is happening and what you can do next. So these 7 questions explain nearly everything about your current patient mix. And together they form a diagnostic or a way of looking under the hood of your practice's positioning. Each question exposes a slightly different angle, like how patients perceive your value, how your signals shape your identity, how your message attracts specific types of patients, how your ideal patient is defined, how your practice may be seen as interchangeable with other practices, how your case mix is shaped by positioning, and ultimately the gap between who you want to be seen as and how you're actually perceived. Now, this isn't about tactics. This isn't about some advertising tricks. This isn't about working harder. This is about understanding the structural reasons why your practice attracts the patients it attracts and what has to change to shift that dynamic. So let's walk through these questions one by one. The first question is about what we call the value gap. The question is, do patients clearly understand what makes your dentistry different and better? Most of the time, the honest answer is no. You and your clinical peers can see a huge difference between a rushed, insurance driven crown and the kind of work you're proud to put your name on. But here's the uncomfortable truth: patients don't judge based on objective clinical quality, they judge based on what they perceive. Things like how clearly you explain options, whether your website sounds any different from the dentist down the street, whether your reviews feel generic or specific. And if that perception doesn't match the real quality of your work, you may end up with a value gap. You're delivering at a high level, but patients can't really see it, so they can't value it and they won't pay for it. The whole point of this first question is simple. If your value isn't being communicated intentionally, consistently, and clearly, It's effectively invisible, and invisible value doesn't drive better patients, better cases, or better profits. Question two is about what patients see before they uh, even meet you, what we call the signal imprint. The question is, do my practice's public signals make us look like just another dental office? And think about all the places a prospective patient encounters you, your website, your Google business profile, your reviews, even the promotions and offers you might offer, whether you mean it or not. All of that is sending a signal about what kind of practice you are and um, who you're the right practice for. If those signals lean heavily on we take your insurance or affordable dentistry or $99 new patient special, um, guess who feels like your practice was built for them? Well, it's likely going to be those price driven, low margin patients. On the flip side, if your signals emphasize clinical excellence and long term relationships and comprehensive care and great outcomes, you start to imprint something very different in the mind of a higher quality patient. The key idea here is your external signals are pre-selecting your patient type, whether you realize it or not. This question is really meant to force you to look at those public facing signals and ask, are we accidentally broadcasting commodity practice, or are we intentionally signaling the kind of practice we actually are or really want to be? Um, Question three goes deeper into your words. It's what we refer to as the messaging mismatch. The question is, are my messages attracting the patients I actually want? A lot of dental marketing tries to talk to everyone. We treat all families, the whole family in all cases. We're gentle, caring dentistry. We see kids, adults, and seniors, and it sounds good to cast that broad net. Um, but it's also makes the messaging very interchangeable with most other offices in town. And when your message is vague and generic, it doesn't pull in everyone. It tends to default to those that are least discerning and are often most price sensitive and insurance driven. In other words, the patient who responds most aggressively to generic messaging is typically the ones who are shopping purely on price, focused on what does my insurance cover, the least interested in comprehensive or elective care. The big idea of this question is your message determines who raises their hand. If you want higher value, relationship oriented patients, your message has to sound like it was written specifically for them, their worries, their priorities, their desired outcomes, not just anybody with teeth. Question four is where we turn the lens inward a little bit. It's the patient profile problem. And the question is, have I clearly defined the patient I want to attract? Most practices think they have. They'll say things like, we want good patients who value dentistry, but that's not really a profile. That's, you know, basically just a wish. A real ideal patient profile is specific demographics, age range, household income, life stage. Includes consideration of psychographics, how they feel about health, time, and money. Their behaviors. Do they follow through, accept treatment? Do they refer their friends? When this isn't clearly defined by the practice, who it is they ideally are targeting, the market tends to do something by default, and it assigns your patient profile for you. Uh, the default is almost always low margin, price sensitive, kind of reactive patients, because those are the people who respond to generic dentistry marketing, and they are the people that the algorithms tend to point towards practices with that generic marketing. So this question is really asking, have we intentionally chosen who we want to fill our schedule with? Or are we letting the marketplace decide for us and then trying to fix it chair side, one case at a time? If the ideal patient isn't defined on paper, really, it's almost certainly not defined in your positioning. Question 5 is what we refer to as the commodity trap. And the question is, do patients see our practice as truly differentiated from other local dentists? To a lot of patients, every practice in a given area looks basically like a row of nearly identical options. It's the same basic services, similar websites, similar promises. When that happens, they do the only really rational thing they can. They overweight price and insurance coverage in their decision. After all, if they can't see a meaningful difference between A, B, and C, I'm going to pick whoever takes my insurance, or whoever has the lowest out-of-pocket costs, or whoever is the fastest and most convenient. Well, that's that commodity trap. The question forces you to ask, what specifically would make a patient in my town say that practice is clearly different, and here's why. Is that difference actually visible anywhere in our external marketing, or is it only something we talk about once they're already in the chair? Because really, if differentiation only exists inside the operatory, you've already lost the battle in terms of positioning, which determines patient quality and, in large measure, case acceptance. Next, we look at the patient type disconnect. And the question here is, does my positioning match the patient type I want to attract? Let's say you tell me you want long-term relationship-driven patients who say yes to comprehensive care, uh, who value quality over cheap and fast. Now, imagine your external positioning is insurance heavy, promotion or discount focused, emphasizing convenience and low price. Well, there's an obvious disconnect there. High value, relationship driven patients tend to seek out practices that look and feel like authorities, practices that talk about outcomes, long term health, and expertise, not just coupons or coverage. This slide is really asking, if a patient who fits my ideal profile saw only our website and our Google listing, our Google business profile, would they say this looks like a practice built for someone like me? Or would they scroll past, assuming we're just another, dental insurance mill? When positioning and desired patient type are out of alignment, you get a constant stream of the wrong patients. And it's reinforced by Google algorithm patterns that evaluate who is choosing you. So it's really very hard to, if not impossible, to fix that just purely based on better case presentation once they're in the chair. Finally, we get to question 7, which pulls everything together into what we refer to as the positioning gap. The question is there a gap between the quality of my clinical expertise and the quality of my practice and how patients and algorithms perceive it? Most of the dentists we work with are much better than their marketing makes them look. Clinically, they're excellent. They have strong ethics, a good team, and good systems. But online, they appear almost identical to an average or even below average practice. That gap between reality and perception is what we call the positioning gap, and it's not just about ego. It drives the quality of patients who show up. It drives the case mix you see. It drives your margins and overall profitability. If algorithms and prospective patients perceive you as just another dentist, then you get fed a steady diet of low margin transactional patients, regardless of how good you actually are. Now, the good news is when you close that positioning gap, when the outside perception finally matches the inside reality, patient quality, case acceptance, and profit all start to shift together. That's why we say the positioning gap is the core issue behind patient quality. The rest of the presentation, we'll be talking about helping ways to help you see exactly where that gap exists in your practice and what you can do about it. So this is one of the most frustrating parts of dentistry, as we've talked with hundreds of dentists, and it's something almost every high quality clinician either has dealt with or still is dealing with, and that is the question: why can't I find patients? Sorry, the question is not why can't I find patients? It's why do I keep attracting the wrong patients? And the truth is, it has nothing to do with your clinical skill. What makes this even more frustrating is that the patients who push back the hardest are often the ones who came to you assuming all dentists are the same. So you're delivering higher level work to people who don't even have a framework to recognize or value that difference. Excellence in dentistry just doesn't automatically attract excellent patients, unfortunately. Patients aren't evaluating your margins, your occlusion philosophy, or your treatment planning depth. They're evaluating the perception they form before they ever meet you. And that's why this isn't a marketing problem either. You can run ads, update your website, post reviews, even change agencies. But if the positioning is off, everything that you do just amplifies that wrong identity. The real issue isn't a demand. There's plenty of demand. It's demand quality, the type of patient your practice is positioned to attract. And once you see that distinction, that patient quality is driven by perception, not clinical skill, the entire rest of this framework becomes a lot more clear. When we talk about positioning, we're talking about something very simple. It's just how the market, and that's people and search algorithms, how the market perceives your practice relative to alternatives. In a digital world, that is importantly driven by these algorithms that categorize you and determine which types of patients they are going to be sending your way. Now, it's important that the positioning is not how you see your practice. It's not how your team sees your practice. It's how a prospective patient, someone with very limited dental knowledge and also emotionless computer algorithms. It's how they perceive you when they compare you to the other local options. Weak positioning creates confusions. Patients can't tell who you're built for, what you specialize in, why you're different from the office down the street. And when patients are confused, they default to the simplest comparison points: price, convenience, and insurance. Strong positioning does the opposite. It makes it immediately obvious who your practice is really for, what kind of dentistry you do, and why a certain type of patient is naturally drawn to you. In other words, a strong positioning doesn't just attract the right patients, it tends to repel the wrong ones. And that clarity is what begins to change the entire patient mix and profit structure of a practice. So here is why positioning matters so much. When your positioning isn't clear, when patients can't quickly tell who you are and what you stand for or what makes you different, they default to the only decision criteria that they do understand, things like price or insurance coverage, convenience. And it's not that they're bad patients, it's that they don't have enough information to make a more informed decision. So they fall back to the simplest, most familiar filters. But when your positioning is clear, when your messaging, visuals, language, and patient experience all signal a specific identity, something powerful can happen. And that is that the right patients start to self select. Patients who care about long term outcomes, patients who value quality, patients who resonate with your philosophy. They see themselves in your practice. And just as importantly, the patients who aren't a good fit tend to filter themselves out. Well, that's the real leverage of strong positioning. It shifts patient behavior before they ever walk through the door. When we talk about positioning, we aren't talking about slogans or branding. We're talking about something much deeper, and it really comes down to three core elements. The first is having clarity on who your ideal patient is, not in vague terms like someone who values their health, but in clear, concrete language. Their priorities, their expectations, how they make decisions. That's what determines whether they're a good fit for the dentistry you deliver. The second is what you do differently. Every practice believes they care more or focuses on quality, but differentiation isn't what you believe, it's what patients can see. It's the unique approach, philosophy, or experience that sets you apart in a way that patients can actually recognize. And the third piece of positioning is why it matters. Patients don't buy techniques or technology, they buy outcomes. They buy clarity, confidence, trust, comfort, predictability, the things that matter in their actual lives. When these three elements are aligned, who you're who you're who you've built your practice for, what makes you different, and why any of it matters to the patient, your positioning becomes clear, compelling, and really magnetic to the right kinds of patients. And these elements, they don't stand alone. They reinforce one another. Your ideal patient shapes what makes you different, and your differentiation only matters if it connects directly to outcomes that matter to that ideal patient. There's a sequence that really separates predictable, high quality patient attraction from constant frustration most practices experience. And it moves from clarity to strategy built on that clarity, and then finally execution. Now, it starts with clarity, knowing exactly who you serve. And that, by definition, that means not everyone, not every possible patient, but the specific patient profile that your practice is best suited for. Without that clarity, everything downstream becomes guesswork. Once clarity is established, you move into strategy, which is designing your position intentionally. This is where you decide what makes your practice meaningfully different, how you want your patients to perceive you, and what identity you want to occupy in the marketplace. Only after that clarity and strategy comes the execution, the messaging, the website, the visuals, the ads, the reviews, the systems, the patient experience. Execution only works when it's expressing a well-designed position consistently. And here's why this matters. Most practices skip straight to execution. They redesign the website or hire a marketing agency or try to run SEO or run ads, all without clarity or a cogent strategy in place. That creates confusion for patients and wastes time and money for the practice, because tactics without positioning don't change patient quality. That positioning has to come first. And one of the real key concepts is understanding that patient behavior um, relies on what we call the trust threshold. Every patient comes into your practice with a certain level of trust, and that level determines the type of decisions they're willing to make. Below the trust threshold, patients behave in very predictable ways. They compare prices. They rely heavily on insurance to make decisions. They accept only the minimum necessary treatment. This isn't because they're difficult. It's because they don't yet have enough trust to make bigger, long-term, value-based decisions. Now, above the trust threshold, everything changes. Patients become more open to your guidance relating to comprehensive treatment and long-term planning and investing in their health. Now, what's important to understand is that patients don't magically cross this threshold during the exam. They cross it before they even sit in your chair. And it's based on how your practice is positioned and the trust signals that you've already sent into the market. So when we talk about positioning, we're really talking about raising a patient's trust level in advance so that they arrive prepared to make those higher value decisions. Now, based on observing hundreds of practices, we created what we call the patient expectation framework. And it's one of the biggest mindset shifts for most practices. Patients don't develop their expectations after they've met you. They generally develop them before they've ever walked into your office or even contacted you. And depending on your positioning, patients show up with one of four expectation levels. First is low expectations. These patients are looking for simplest, cheapest, quickest solution. They focus on basic care and price above all else. Next is insurance expectations. These patients really outsource their decision making to their insurance benefits. Their primary question is, what will my plan cover? They're not making value based decisions, they're making coverage based decisions. Now, a step up from that is the quality expectations. And these patients come in looking for expertise, outcomes, clarity, and long term planning. They expect thoughtful care. They see dentistry as something that impacts their overall health. And finally, at the top are our premium expectations. These are patients that value excellence, experience, and trust. They're looking for a practice that reflects a higher standard in communication, in environment, in outcomes, and philosophy. And here's the key insight. Your positioning determines which expectation level patients show up with. If you position like a commodity, you attract low expectation or insurance expectation patients. If you position with clarity and authority, you attract quality and premium expectation patients. Now, expectation determines behavior, and positioning sets the expectation long before they ever walk into your office. So the thing is, positioning really controls everything. It controls who shows up because your external signals determine which types of patients feel like your practice is meant for them. People respond to identities that match their own. It controls what they expect because your messaging sets their expectation bar before they ever speak to your team. Whether they come in expecting basic dentistry or expecting expert guidance is already decided by the signals they've seen. It controls how they make decisions because positioning influences the criteria patients use to evaluate their recommendation, your fees, and your approach. Low position practices get price based decisions. Strongly positioned practices get trust based decisions. And it controls what patients value because differentiation shapes the way they interpret your dentistry. If you look interchangeable, they value price. If you look distinct and intentional, they value outcomes, expertise, and long term health. Once you see this chain of cause and effect, positioning shaping perception, perception shaping decisions, and decision shaping patient quality, the entire pattern of your practice becomes quite predictable. None of it has really ever been random, and none of it has ever been personal. It's structural. Everything downstream, case acceptance, margins, stress levels, even your enjoyment of dentistry is shaped by positioning. Positioning isn't one piece of the puzzle, it's the foundation the entire patient experience is built on. And so, one of the real important concepts in positioning is this idea of identity mismatch. Every patient, every practice has two identities. The first is your intended identity, how you see yourself, how you practice, and the kind of dentistry you genuinely want to deliver. For many clinicians, this means premium level care, deeper relationships, and a comprehensive, thoughtful approach. But you also have a second identity, and that's your perceived identity. This is the identity that the market and algorithms assign to you based on your external signals, like your website, your Google business profile, your reviews, photography, your offers, um, uh, your messaging, and even what your scheduling experience looks like. And when that perceived identity feels like basic dentistry or insurance first or just a commodity provider, even though that's not who you are internally, the market responds to the perception, not the reality. So, this mismatch explains why highly skilled dentists can feel stuck attracting patients who only want the bare minimum or question every recommendation. If the intended identity and the perceived identity are not aligned, the wrong types of patients will consistently show up, not because of your dentistry, but because of how the practice appears from the outside. Now, fixing this mismatch is one of the biggest leverage points in shifting patient quality and case acceptance. So, when we talk about attracting better patients, we're not talking about wealth or status. We're talking about mindset and behavior. High value patients share a very specific profile, and it has almost nothing to do with demographics and really everything to do with how they feel, how they think about their health and their decisions. First, they value long term outcomes. They're not interested in the cheapest or quickest fix. They want the right solution, the one that protects their overall health over time. Second, they seek expertise, not price. They want a dentist that they can trust, someone who will guide them, someone who has a clear philosophy and communicates with confidence. Third, they appreciate quality differences. They may not understand the technical details, but they know there is a difference between average dentistry and excellent dentistry, and they're willing to invest in the difference. They also make thoughtful decisions. They ask good questions. They consider the long term implications, and they're not making choices based solely on what insurance dictates. High value patients also have uh, a real value of relationships. They want continuity and clarity and a sense of partnership in their care. And most importantly, they accept full treatment plans when they trust the diagnosis and the dentist. When you position your practice correctly, these are the kind of patients who naturally gravitate toward you, not because you sold them, but because your identity matches their expectations and desires. Now, just as high value patients share a predictable set of characteristics, low value patients do as well. And these behaviors aren't random, they are responses to the signals your practice is sending. Low value patients tend to make price driven decisions. They're comparing you to other offices based on discounts or specials or out of pocket costs because that's the lens your positioning has activated for them. They also show an insurance first mindset. Their primary decision maker isn't you, it's the coverage table on their benefit sheet. They often carry a commodity perception of dentistry in their mind. Every dentist is basically the same, so there's no reason to prioritize quality or consistency or long term outcomes. These patients typically exhibit minimal commitment. They may push off treatment or cancel appointments or accept only the bare minimum. They also display short term thinking. They're focused on what solves today's problems, not what prevents tomorrow's. And finally, they're convenience focused. They value speed and ease far more than outcomes or relationships. Now, none of this is meant to judge patients. This is simply how certain types of patients behave when they interpret your practice through a commodity lens. And this is the key point here is that your positioning determines which profile you attract, high value or low value patients. They respond to entirely different signals. Positioning is what decides which group feels like your practice was built for them. By this point, you've seen how much patient behavior is driven by perception. And here we're just looking at where that perception actually comes from. Every single touch point your practice puts into the world is sending a signal about your positioning. Your website tells patients what kind of practice you are before they read a word of text. The layout, the photography, the tone, all of it sets expectations. Your messaging communicates what you value. Is it outcomes, expertise, convenience, affordability? Well, patients interpret that instantly. Your reviews also tell a story about what people believe you're the best at and what kind of patient experience you're consistently delivering. Your offers are one of the strongest signals of all. Discounts, specials, and insurance heavy framing attract a very different patient than messaging centered on clarity, outcomes, and long term value. Your visual identity, colors, fonts, imagery, shapes, emotional perception, and patients decide whether you feel like a commodity or a category of one based on design cues alone. Your Google business profile is often the very first impression that patients get of your practice, and they will assign identity from whatever they see there in about 3 seconds. Your insurance display, how and where you present insurance information, also heavily influences whether patients view you as a premium provider or more of a transactional provider. Your team language reinforces identity. The way phones are answered, how scheduling is framed, how treatment is explained, it all signals a level of clarity or a level of chaos. And finally, your office environment tells patients whether you practice at the level your website promises. Environment is positioning made physical. So all of these signals shape perception long before dentistry even begins. This is why positioning is so powerful, is it operates before the clinical relationship even starts. And differentiation is one of the most misunderstood concepts in dentistry. If a patient can't explain what makes you different, then you're not differentiated, no matter how different you believe you are. That's the key distinction. Differentiation isn't what you think sets you apart. Patients don't experience your training or technology or your clinical philosophy directly. Differentiation only exists if it is clear, meaning instantly noticeable, specific, not generic claims that can be shared by any dental office, and also meaningful to the patient, tied to the outcomes that they actually care about. So if your differentiation is something patients can't articulate in their own words, then from their perspective, there really isn't a difference. And when there's no difference, patients, again, default to comparing you on the simplest variables: price, insurance, convenience, or location. The goal of positioning is to eliminate that comparison entirely, not by being louder, but by being clearer. When a patient can look at your practice and say, I know exactly what makes them different, and that difference matters to me, now the competition disappears. That's the level of differentiation that you should be aiming for. Now, one of the real important dynamics to understand in the entire patient quality conversation is what we refer to as the low margin patient cycle. This is the loop that keeps many practices stuck, even when the dentist is clinically excellent and working incredibly hard. It starts with commodity signals, generic positioning that makes your practice appear similar to every other practice. That might be your website, your offers, your Google business profile, or simply how your messaging is interpreted. Those signals naturally attract price driven patients, the wrong audience for comprehensive care. These are the people who raise their hand first because the positioning feels like it was built for them. Once they arrive, they bring a shallow value perception, low expectations shaped by insurance or cost or convenience. They aren't prepared to understand or value the level of dentistry you actually provide. That leads to low case acceptance, not because the clinical diagnosis is wrong, but because the patient arrived with the wrong expectations, the wrong identity, and the wrong filters for decision making. So they accept minimal treatment. And when the practice repeatedly treats low value, low expectation patients, it reinforces a commodity identity in the community, as well as with algorithms. And so the market says, that's the kind of office they are. They're a commodity or transaction based dental office. And so the cycle repeats, and the loop is really powerful because it is self reinforcing. But the good news is the moment that you change the signals at the top, you can begin to shift the entire cycle. Now, breaking this loop is really the doorway to attracting better patients, increasing case acceptance, and improving profitability. And you can do that without working harder or seeing more people. In fact, often with seeing fewer patients. So, foundational to understanding patient behavior is categorizing variances in consumer decision making personas as it relates to dental services. Now, we've developed what we call the patient identity spectrum as a simple but effective way to do that categorization. Every patient who contacts your practice already places themselves somewhere along the spectrum. And importantly, they interpret your practice identity through the same lens. On the far left, you have commodity driven patients. These patients believe all dentistry is basically the same. They assume the only meaningful differences are cost, convenience, or um, or possibly insurance coverage. Now, a step up from that are price-driven patients, and their primary filter isn't outcomes or trust; it's affordability, and so they choose based on lowest out-of-pocket costs or what insurance dictates. That as you move up another step, you move into convenience-driven patients, and these are patients that want fast, easy, and simple. They're not looking at long-term considerations. Their decisions are based on minimizing friction rather than maximizing health. Next, you start to see a very different type of patient up here. Health-driven patients care about long-term outcomes. They want a dentist who can guide them uh, over the long term, not just fix today's problems. Next are value-driven patients that go even further. They're making decisions based on clarity, quality, and trust. They're willing to invest when something is important, and they appreciate the difference between average and excellent dentistry. At the right are premium patients. And these are people who value expertise, a relationship driven experience, and a higher standard of care. And what's crucial to understand is this: your positioning determines where you sit on the spectrum, and therefore which types of patients you can will consistently choose you. Strong positioning pulls you to the right side of the spectrum. Weak or generic positioning pulls you to the left. And wherever you sit, the patients who identify with that level are the ones who are naturally going to raise their hand for you. So here's one of the truly painful and most common frustrations we hear from high quality clinicians, and that's the gap between what patients see and what's actually true. So let's start with the left side of what patients see. Many practices unintentionally project convenience clues or convenience signals like quick online scheduling or broad service lists or generic headlines. And none of these are bad on their own, but they do signal standard dentistry. Patients also see generic claims, statements that could appear on any dentist's website. We care about our patients, or we offer high quality dentistry, and so on. These phrases don't differentiate you, they actually blend you in. Then there's the similarity to others. When your visuals, messaging, Google presence look like every other practice, patients assume you are like every other practice. And finally, a lack of differentiation. If patients can immediately tell what makes you meaningfully different, they assume nothing does, and they start making decisions based on or insurance. Now, the right side of the slide, what's actually true about your practice, tells a very different story. You may have higher level clinical skills, a deeper philosophy, you may offer better long term outcomes, and a far more thoughtful approach to patient care. The problem is simply that none of that is visible to the patient as they first start looking at you. And here's the key insight: when perception doesn't match reality, you necessarily will attract the wrong patients and do so consistently. And because algorithms track who engages with you, who calls you, and who reviews you, they reinforce that perception, sending you more of the very patients you least want. It isn't that the good patients don't exist. In fact, there's $40 million of premium dental services each year within a 15-minute drive of the average dental practice. I mean, there's plenty of good patients. It's that they cannot see the version of your practice that you see. Closing this perception gap is one of the most powerful things you can do to change your patient mix and increase your practice profitability. So everything ultimately comes back to a simple chain of cause and effect. Positioning creates perception, and perception determines patient quality. The signals your practice sends, the message, the identity, the tone, the visuals, the way you frame your expertise, all of that shapes the narrative patients build about who you are. That narrative becomes their perception, not of dentistry in general, but of your practice specifically. So what they believe you prioritize is what they are is the perception that they create, the kind of patients they think you serve, what level of care they assume you provide, how much they trust your judgment, and all of those perceptions directly influence who you attract. Patients who resonate with the identity they perceive will raise their hand. Patients who don't resonate will quietly move on. This is the reason some practices consistently attract thoughtful, health oriented, relationship driven patients, while others attract price driven, convenience focused, insurance dependent patients. Even when the dentistry itself is better in the first uh, or in this latter for the latter practice. Positioning isn't a marketing tactic. It's the underlying architecture that shapes every belief a patient forms about you. Change the signals and you change the perception. Change the perception and you change the type of patients who show up. But if that perception goes uncorrected, both patients and algorithms continue amplifying it, making things worse and harder to fix the longer you wait. The fact is, positioning is always at work. The only question is whether it's working for you or against you. Every patient forms a story about you, about your practice, long before they meet you. And that story is built entirely from the signals they encounter. Your website is often the first signal. Patients decide in seconds whether it feels like a basic insurance driven office or a practice built around clarity, outcomes, and expertise. Your messaging is one of the strongest signals you send. The words you choose to tell patients tells them what to value and what you value, what they can expect, and who your practice is actually built for. Strong messaging raises expectations, generic messaging lowers them. Your reviews shape credibility and identity. Patients don't just look at your star rating, they look at what patterns are there. Do the reviews describe thoughtful, comprehensive care, or do they sound like every other dental office? Your Google business profile influences perception instantly, especially with more and more people searching on their phones. Photos, categories, descriptions, and even the order of reviews create an identity before the patient clicks anything else. Your visual identity, the design, colors, layout, and imagery communicates whether your practice feels like a commodity or a category of one. Visuals shape emotion much faster than text. Also, your offers carry major positioning weight. A $99 new patient special communicates something very different from messaging focused on long term value and comprehensive care. Your insurance display tells patients how to think about your practice. Is insurance the primary driver of decisions or just one administrative detail of a higher level experience? Your competitor contrast, whether intentional or not, tells patients whether you belong in the standard category or the specialized outcome focused category. And finally, your team language reinforces identity patients perceive. Tone, clarity, confidence, and warmth all signal whether you operate at a higher level or just follow the typical motions. All of these signals combine to create one unified perception in the patient's mind. Who are you, who you serve, and what they should expect from you. Shape the signals and you shape the perception. Shape the perception and you shape your patient mix. At this point, you've probably started to see patterns, not just in the framework, but hopefully in your own practice. You may be realizing why certain types of patients show up again and again, and why some accept treatment easily while others resist everything, and why profitability doesn't always match the level of work that you're capable of providing, and that you do provide your patients. Well, as you can probably see, none of this is random. None of it really is a mystery, and none of it is about working harder. What you're experiencing is simply the result of how your patients perceive your practice and how your practice is positioned. Um, that is key because it drives how patients look at you before they ever walk in the door, and you have the ability to create an impression based on your professional skills and abilities. So if you want to understand exactly why your practice attracts the patients it attracts, and more importantly, how to shift that dynamic, then the next step is really to get clear, because the longer a practice is categorized in a certain way by patients and by algorithms, the deeper the hole becomes. That's the purpose of what we offer, which is a practice profit gap review. It's a structured, short conversation where we look at specific signals your practice is sending, unpack how those signals shape patient expectations, and map out the positioning forces that are driving your current patient mix. The goal of the call isn't to sell you anything. The goal is just to provide you a bit more clarity, because clarity really is the foundation of building an effective strategy. And once you see the real reasons behind your patient quality and profit patterns, the path forward becomes much simpler and much more predictable. So, if you're ready for that level of clarity, we'd love to jump on a brief call with you and go through your positioning. So, just go ahead and request um, your practice profit gap review, and we would be happy to take a look at what is driving your current patient mix, and what opportunities you have to change that. So thanks for taking the time to walk through this framework. I know there's a lot to unpack, but if you're a relationship driven patient and you care about income or outcomes and long-term health and meaningful patient connections, then you deserve a patient base that reflects that level of commitment. The challenges you face aren't a reflection of your skill or your work ethic. They're the result of positioning forces that can be understood, adjusted, and improved. And when those forces come into alignment, everything changes. The patients who show up change, the conversations you have change, the trust, the case acceptance, the margins, all of it shifts in the direction you've always intended your practice to go. At Opke, that's the work we're committed to, helping thoughtful, high quality dentists attract the patients who value what they do. So thank you again. And whenever you're ready for clarity, we're here to help.